Well, out of the Resident Evil movies I like from the live action films, this one is my favourite. There's several reasons why I like Resident Evil Apocalypse. Maybe it's because it's probably the most accurate out of the Resident Evil films, which is bloody saying something. It features characters from the games this time around, and is an improvement upon the original, but still somehow deviates from the source material. It's a confusing franchise, trust me. Now, while the first film was panned by critics, that didn't stop the filmmakers from making a sequel, since the first movie made a lot of dollary-doos. But with the sequel, on the other hand, hope you're looking forward to your cinematic trip to Raccoon City, because it's a bloody continuity abattoir from here on out. But with that being said, I'm As the Pop Culture Viking, and with spoilers ahead, let's take a pop culture look into Resident Evil Apocalypse.
Who the fuck are you?
Well, thanks to the success of the first Resident Evil movie, it's no surprise that Paul W.S. Anderson was in discussion with Milla Jovovich to plan a sequel while promoting the first Resident Evil film. Anderson said he began writing the screenplay for the second film after completing the first and had plans for Alice to meet up with Jill Valentine. And Milla Jovovich confirmed her character would return for the sequel if the first film was a success. Because I guess that's how it works in Hollywood. You're my husband, that means I get to star in all of your movies. In early March, Eric Mabius, who played Matt in the first film, stated a sequel was confirmed, would be set in Raccoon City, and would feature the Nemesis character. It was also confirmed that several characters from the game would make an appearance this time around, which I'm guessing was due to some fans being a tad bit cranky that none of the characters from the games appeared in the last movie. The sequel was officially greenlit by Sony Pictures in mid-2002, but Paul W.S. Anderson chose not to direct due to commitments to Alien vs Predator, but he did stay on board as a film screenwriter and one of the producers. Anderson used the game Resident Evil 3 Nemesis as a basis of the story and wrote in elements from his favourite films, such as the perimeter wall in Escape from New York and the deserted city in the Omega Man. Now, when it came to finding directors for the film, Alexander Witt was hired to direct the film, which became his feature film directorial debut. Alexander Witt has worked usually as a second unit director and cinematographer who's worked on a lot of films, but his biggest projects included some Fast and Furious films, the Daniel Craig Bond movies, and a handful of Marvel films, along with being a frequent collaborator with Ridley Scott on films like Black Hawk Down and Gladiator. The script had already been completed when Alexander Witt was hired, but he made some suggestions to Paul W.S. Anderson and fellow producer Jeremy Bolt, to which resulted in some minor script changes. But now let's look at the casting for the film. Now, when it came to the casting, Milla Jovovich is the only one from the first film that returns for the sequel, because everyone else fucking died in the last one, you see. The only exception being Eric Mabius as Matt. Now, while Eric Mabius confirmed the sequel, it was thought that he would return to play Nemesis. The only time you see Eric Mabius playing Matt in the sequel is only from archival footage from the previous film. But however, the role ended up going to Matthew G. Taylor instead, who is a bloody big boy. I mean, look at the size of that bloke. As for the remaining cast, we'll start with Sienna Guillory as Jill Valentine, which the role had Natasha Henstridge in mind, but she was unavailable. Odin Fair as Carlos Oliveira, Thomas Kretschmer as Major Timothy Kane, Sophie Favacha as Angela Ashford, Jade Harris as Dr. Charles Ashford, Reza Kadodi as Sergeant Payton, Mike Epps as Lord Jefferson Wayne.
You can call me LJ on the count of the informal situation.
Which the role was written for Snoop Dogg, who dropped out of the project, and the role was rewritten for Mike Epps instead. Sandra Holt as Terry Morales, Zach Ward as Nikolai, and Ian Glenn as Dr. Alexander Isaacs. Now, before we continue, Claire Renfield was originally meant to appear in Resident Evil Apocalypse in a major role and was to be played by Gina Phillips from Jeepers Creepers fame, but the actress turned down the role. The role was then offered to Emily Burkle, but left the project before filming began. So it was then decided to scrap the entire Claire Renfield character from the film, who wouldn't make her first appearance until Resident Evil Extinction. Now, before we move on to the production itself, keep in mind that there were quite a few rewrites to the script when it came to putting together Resident Evil Apocalypse. First, the final fight between Alice and Nemesis was changed from being in a train station and interacting with props to an outdoor one-on-one fight in front of Raccoon City Hall, and the fight was shortened for screen time than originally planned. Paul W.S. Anderson and other crew members did consider making the zombies move faster, but the idea was scrapped due to the possible breaking of fundamentals from the original games. And probably a good idea too, considering that 28 Days Later and the Dawn of the Dead remake already did fast zombies in those films. Also, due to Paul W.S. Anderson's other commitments, he only appeared on set for a couple of days, and any other changes that were discussed with Alexander Witt involved the dialogue and production that was sent via email. The script's original ending also had Alice escaping from Umbrella on her own and using more of her telekinetic powers before meeting up with Valentine. Half of the scene was filmed before the ending was rewritten. Filming locations was shot entirely in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and its surrounding suburbs stood in for Raccoon City. Cinematography was performed by Christian Sabal and Derek Rogers, and filming took place at 40 47 locations. Very few sets were made for the film, as several city blocks were closed down and the Prince Edward Viaduct Bridge was closed for 3 days, so scenes could be filmed on it. Scenes were also shot outside Toronto City Hall for 2 weeks. Mila Jovovich and Matthew Taylor spent several hours a day for 6 weeks practicing martial arts together for the fight scene between Alice and Nemesis outside Toronto City Hall, which stood in for the Raccoon City Hall. Which is interesting that they chose a Canadian city for filming, as Raccoon City in the games is modelled off Montreal, Quebec, Canada. The sequel soundtrack was different this time around compared to the first film, as the movie soundtrack contained alternative metal songs for both featured in the film and inspired by it. The soundtrack included multiple metal artists, including Cradle of Filth, Killswitch Engage, and Slipknot. As for the rest of the soundtrack, Jeff Danner composed the film score, performed by the London Philharmonia Orchestra. Now, when it came to the characters' looks and designs, it was definitely more recognisable and accurate to the games, and everyone's just looking fabulous! Alice was swapped from a red dress for a more practical long pants, boots, and a tank top look, which was arranged with weapons. Guessing it had something to do with Mila Jovovich getting tired of being in the nude in most of her movies in the 2000s. Carlos Oliveira we see in his tactical gear like in the games, but it's an all-black look for the film instead of a mix of dark green like in the games. Jill Valentine's outfit in the film, which consists of a tube top and miniskirt, is based on her costume from Nemesis. And Serena Guillory also studied Jill Valentine's movements from the games to mimic her walk for the movie. Paul W.S. Anderson was also going to call it her undercover outfit, but added a heatwave subplot instead as a reason she's wearing an outfit like that. Now, while the heatwave subplot was added into the movie, Paul W.S. Anderson ended up didn't giving 2 shits about any questions being asked about it, and basically responded with, "If you don't like it, don't watch the movie." Which is my response to any Karens having to sook about the littlest things in their movies and TV shows. Special effects in the film included green screens, CGI, matted paintings, tracking, wire removal, and scale models. Actors and actresses portraying zombies spent 4 days training with choreographers at a zombie boot camp to make sure that all had consistent behaviour and movements. The Nemesis character was created with a costume, and the only CGI effect added was an adjustment to his eye. The costume was specifically built for Matthew Taylor's body and weighed about 65 pounds or 29 kilos. Even though the bloke was already 6'7" and weighed 145 kilos or 320 pounds for our American viewers, the effects team still modified the character to make him appear 10 to 20% larger in certain scenes. The lickers were completely CGI this time around. The effects team had originally used animatronics for some of the scenes, but were unhappy with the results. Core Digital Pictures won the contract to animate the lickers, beating several other effects companies who had submitted their own designs, and described it as the most challenging special effect they created for the film. The studio created over 250 special effects, including superimposing Jovovich's face onto the stunt double. While Mila Jovovich performed most of her own stunts, her insurance company would not allow her to attempt several of the more dangerous ones. Frantic Films created 78 special effects for the film, including tracer fire, muzzle flashes, lasers, and slow motion, using effects programs like Iron Fusion, Autodesk 3ds Max, as well as in-house software. Mr. X Inc. created additional effects, including the scene showing the destruction of the Toronto City Hall building. 4 months were spent making a 43-foot 1/6 scale model of the building with 1,600 panels of glass, each of which were wired with an explosive to create the final effect. Digital intermediate work was completed by Computers Film Company. Colours in the film were edited heavily in post-production, giving it a darker look overall while enhancing the brightness of blood and gore. The colours of the Nemesis costume were also tweaked to make it more lifelike, and Alice and Valentine were given more modifications, such as increasing the glow of their skin and redness of their lips. Guys, bloody calm down with your special effects. Save some of the budget for the catering. Now, before I go into my personal review after a rewatch, we're going to start with the differences between the games and the movie. Now, keep in mind the movie's story, characters, and elements are based on Resident Evil 3 and not Resident Evil 2. But I'll talk about both games and share how it kinda would make sense to skip elements from the second game. But I'll keep it simple, and spoilers for a couple of games that came out years ago, and also have a couple of remake versions that have just recently released. So Resident Evil 2 follows Claire Renfield looking for her brother Chris, who was featured in the first game, and Leon S. Kennedy, who is a cop transferring to Raccoon City. But both characters cross paths travelling to the city, where they get themselves caught up during the Raccoon City outbreak and seeking refuge in the Raccoon City police station. As for Resident Evil 3, we follow Jill Valentine from the first game during the events of the Raccoon City zombie outbreak, where she ends up being chased by the character known as Nemesis, who is targeting the RPD and STARS members, where she ends up getting help from Carlos, who is a member of the Umbrella's tactical squad. Now, if you follow the game's timeline, Resident Evil 2 is set in between Resident Evil 3's story, because in the third game, the first half we play as Jill Valentine, where she ends up getting infected and knocked unconscious, and then we play as Carlos for a bit, who ends up saving Jill with the antivirus. But while Jill is unconscious, this is where Resident Evil 2's story of the game starts and then finishes before Jill wakes up, and the rest of the story continues through Resident Evil 3 until the city gets destroyed. Now, while elements from Resident Evil 3 are in the film, which includes the cutscene of the RPD and Umbrella tactical forces being overrun, other game elements in the franchise also include Resident Evil Code Veronica, where Alice runs past the helicopter shooting out the glass, which is a scene with Claire Renfield in Code Veronica. Now, as for the characters, the story, and other references between the movies and game, the only characters from the games involved in the movie are Jill Valentine, Carlos Oliveira, Dr. Isaacs, Nikolai, and Nemesis. Charles and Angela Ashfield were made just for the movie, with Charles being one of the scientists who created the T-Virus, and Angela is basically the stand-in for the Sherry character from Resident Evil 2. Nikolai is also in both the game and movie, where Nikolai is the main villain that Jill Valentine has to deal with in the Resident Evil 3 game, while Nikolai in the movie does a face turn and is an ally to Jill, and they only share one scene together before he gets killed saving Jill and Angela.
Oh shit.
With the story from Resident Evil 3, you play as Jill and Carlos, with Nemesis killing STARS members and chasing you throughout the game. While in the movie, we see the Special Tactics and Rescue Squad getting attacked by Nemesis and Jill gets targeted. But the movie deviates from the source material and focuses on Alice versus Nemesis. While Jill, on the other hand, checks notes, doesn't even lay a fucking finger on Nemesis. Are you bloody kidding me? The one major aspect from the games, and the filmmakers just straight up cut it. How dare they? By the way, in the video game, the reason Nemesis is after Jill and Special Tactics and Rescue Squad members is because Jill and Barry, who are members of STARS, are witnesses to what Umbrella are up to in the Spencer Mansion from the first game. And Umbrella is just basically cleaning up any evidence to what they have done. But since that never happened in the movies, Umbrella are just basically killing STARS members just to test out the Nemesis program. Now, there is a reference to events that happened prior with the newspaper clippings in the beginning in Jill's apartment, which references her being decommissioned after investigating a mansion and losing her partner Leon fighting off hordes of zombies. Which does make sense on how she knows what the T-Virus is, which I guess the filmmakers wanted you to go to Specsavers if you wanted to read that bit of information. Also, that sounds interesting. What the fuck happened to that movie? Other monsters missing that are in Raccoon City is Dr. Birkin, who is mutated from the G-Virus, a giant fucking alligator, Plant 43 zombies, paleheads, and hunters. But one of the biggest and most famous monsters missing from the whole film series is Mr. X, aka the Tyrant, that has made a few appearances in the Resi franchise. The only Tyrant that makes an appearance in the movie is Nemesis. Basically, once Jill Valentine and Alice meet up for the first time in the movie, any continuity, side stories, or following the source material gets massively booted through the biggest get-fucked doorway they could find. But anyway, that's as much as I can explain, and to keep it simple, since the Resident Evil lore is bloody all over the place.
We're assets, Nikolai. Expendable assets. And we've just been expended.
As for the movie itself, now while the previous movie I thought was fine and is an enjoyable watch, I do like that I can watch that movie as its own thing, as either a prequel or a self-contained adventure that's part of the Resident Evil game continuity. But however, the reason Apocalypse is my favourite is that I feel like the action, effects, CGI and characters are better in this movie. So for me, Resident Evil Apocalypse is my favourite, with the first movie being my second favourite. Now I love the build-up of the outbreak at the beginning of the film, with Umbrella getting their VIP members out of the city. We see how out of control the T-Virus spreads and the introduction of Jill and Carlos. With Carlos having the charm and skills like in the games, and Jill looking as accurate from the original games in a famous outfit. Along with other characters like LJ, who I like as the comic relief character, and having the benefits of Mike Epps in the cast having great comedy scenes.
Motherfucker, please, look. My shit is custom.
Along with Yuri and Nikolai having great action scenes, and Dr. Ashford, who is the only hope the characters have in escaping the city. And of course, Alice shines in this movie and is the face of the franchise now that she's infected with the T-Virus, but in a more controlled and scientifically enhanced way, and changing from a confused character with amnesia from the first film to just shooting and roundhouse kicking anything in her path. Now while I like that character change of being experimented on, her attitude and personality change I just don't really like. I know that she ended up being experimented on by Umbrella, but she does come across as a bit of a dick to the group sometimes. While I am mixed on the performance of Angela, I think she's an interesting character, as she explains that she's infected with the T-Virus just like Alice, but she was sick with a random disease, and explains that the T-Virus was made by her dad to cure diseases, while also being her own father's test subject. But Umbrella, being the corporate greedy bastards just like real life corporations being greedy bastards are, would rather sell it as a bioweapon to make all the dollars and doom the world. Which is why I love the Umbrella Corporation as an evil company throughout the Resident Evil games and films. Just showing more of the company and their horrible and evil things that they do just to cover their asses. So what happened in Raccoon City, and what do you mean a zombie outbreak happened? Nah, wasn't us. What missile launch? It was a power plant failure. What zombies? Shut up. Yeah, basically the Umbrella Corporation will do anything to cover their tracks and are willing to destroy a major city. Plus I find the Umbrella Corporation are more ruthless in the films than they are in the games, because in the games at least people in the city are given warnings and at least a moment's chance to escape before the city goes kaboom. Unlike Major Kane in the arse over here, who just locks everyone in because bastard. The set pieces and city locations feel bigger than in the first film. The city is treated like a character and is recognisable when you watch the film. Now, obviously if you're Canadian or live around Toronto, you can tell it was filmed there since they use actual city landmarks. But if you were born or lived outside of Canada like myself, who's from Australia, Toronto is a great stand-in for a fictional city like Raccoon City, as other cities like New York or London are too recognisable. And throughout the movie, the sequence with the lickers in the church is tense with the improved CGI. Nemesis looks so good and accurate from the games, until he meets up with Alice, but we'll get to that. The action scenes with the shootout with the RPD, Stars and Umbrella tactical squads in the street against a horde of zombies is my favourite scene in the franchise. Plus, the horror elements in this movie are a massive improvement compared to the previous movie. Perfect example is the school sequence where the group has to try and find Angela to get out of the city, the zombies walking through the alleyways in Raccoon City in massive hordes, and the church scene is some great examples of some great horror moments. Now, while I did whinge about the soundtrack from the previous film, I also want to clarify that the theme song from that previous film is just chef's kiss. Like, you can immediately identify it as a Resident Evil film. But the soundtrack from this film compared to the previous one, the metal soundtracks are used a lot better in this time around compared to the previous one where it was just random metal songs just placed in. But as for the rest of the film, So the structure of the story and writing I honestly don't like. The writing and the filmmakers just should have made the films as spin-offs or standalones with occasional appearances from characters from the games. But instead, as soon as Alice meets Jill and fights Nemesis, it just straight up changes everything like I mentioned earlier. It just should have been Alice's story and her own adventure during the events of Raccoon City without breaking the Resident Evil story and timeline. But instead, Alice pretty much just takes over Jill's role and ends up becoming its own continuity. Which I don't have a problem with that idea, but a heads up would have been nice for the rest of the Resident Evil film so I don't get cranky about it. The villain is not only the worst but also most forgettable out of the Resident Evil films. Like, the character of Major Timothy Kane is as basic as wet lettuce and has the flattest line deliveries. Like, some of the line deliveries from other characters aren't great either, but Kane's are the worst. Other characters I hate who are the most annoying and useless is Terry. Like, who made this character for the films? She doesn't even go here. But now let's get towards the last moments of the film. So after Dr. Ashford gets killed by Major Kane and makes Alice fight Nemesis, we get the reveal that Nemesis was Matt from the first movie the whole time, which we already knew from the first movie, where Nemesis has a change of heart, regains control, and helps Alice and the group fight off the Umbrella guards and escape on the helicopter and leave Kane to be killed and eaten before the city blows up. Now, for those who don't know, in the games, Nemesis is a tyrant variant created by Umbrella, and throughout the game, the more he gets damaged, the more mutated he gets. So just having Nemesis as Matt and pulling a face turn is bloody stupid. Like, Nemesis is a horrible killing machine who can't be reasoned with and shows no remorse and becomes more dangerous and harder to kill. Instead, the movie kills him off after getting crushed by a helicopter. The game version of Nemesis would have shredded the movie version. I mean, at least he says stars like in the game. Stars. But at the end of the film, I honestly don't mind, as it does do a decent job setting up for the next film, and don't worry, we'll get to that one. Like, the helicopter our heroes escape on end up crashed in the mountains, which Alice is dead and discovered by Umbrella and Dr. Isaacs, which leads to Umbrella experimenting on her where she escapes and has telekinetic powers after it's revealed that Dr. Isaac was the one that infected her with the T-virus after the first movie. Then Carlos, Jill, LJ and Angela rescue her and are working for Umbrella? I don't know. And to answer why Dr. Isaacs would just let everyone go after Alice escapes, your guess is as good as mine, because I don't bloody know. And we then leave on a cliffhanger ending with what's to come next. Now, Resident Evil Apocalypse does have more from the games and is an improvement on what was lacking from the first movie, but it does have more problems than it should have, which, after reviewing this movie and making this episode, I am not looking forward to the rest of the movies from this point on.
What's your lucky day?
But anyway, those are my thoughts on Resident Evil Apocalypse. Let's see what fans and critics think. Take it away, Obi-Wan.
Oh, not good.
Resident Evil was heavily panned by critics with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 18%, but with a strong audience score of 16%. You're going to see that critics and fan gap a lot throughout these movies. Critics from the website stated that Resident Evil Apocalypse has a lot of action, but not as much terms of plot or creativity. Metacritic scored the film 36 out of 100 based on 26 reviews, where the film received genuinely unfavourable reviews. Everyone's favourite film critic Roger Ebert gave the film a score of half a star out of 4. Calling it an utterly meaningless waste of time that lacked any wit or imagination and also failed to provide entertaining violence or special effects. He also subsequently named the film as his 8th worst film of 2004. In 2009, Time magazine ranked the film as one of the top 10 worst video game films. While criticising all 3 films released in the Resident Evil series at the time, they concluded that Apocalypse deserves their vote and rated it as the worst out of the 3 films. In 2016, separate journalists from Bloody Disgusting ranked it as both the best and worst film in the series. franchise. Fans, on the other hand, have seen this movie as the most faithful adaptation from the games in the series, while the first film is the fan favourite. Apocalypse is more popular, which fans say it's an improvement on the first film, with most having it as a so bad it's good category or as a guilty pleasure category. As for the box office, with a budget of $45 million, the film made $129.3 million at the box office. Resident Evil Apocalypse opened at number 1 in the United States on September 10, 2004, where it grossed over $23 million in its opening weekend. The film also opened up at number 1 in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines and Mexico, and performed well in Japan, France and Brazil, but however the 2004 film Saw overshadowed it at the box office in the United Kingdom, and it received a lackluster reception in Sweden, where it grossed over $473,000. However, Resident Evil Apocalypse earned over $6 million in Canada and became the highest grossing domestically produced Canadian film in 2004. Resident Evil Apocalypse went on to earn over $129.3 million worldwide against a budget of $45 million, surpassing the earnings of the first film, which generated $102.9 million. As for the marketing and merchandise, a teaser trailer was created titled Regenerate. The teaser trailer consisted of an advertising of a skin rejuvenation product created by the Umbrella Corporation before the woman in the commercial turns into a zombie. By May 2004, the teaser had been downloaded 8.5 million times from the film's official website. Part of the teaser was shown in the film briefly on the television in the background, and part of it was also shown in the mid-credits scene. The film's theatrical trailer was also released on Yahoo Movies in July 2004. A novelization of the film was released the following month, and Screen Gems released a fake newspaper, the Raccoon City Times, to promote the film. The soundtrack for Resident Evil Apocalypse was released on August 31st, 2004, and along with the film's musical score, which was released in September 28th, 2004. The film was released on DVD and VHS in North America on December 28th, 2004. The DVD release included 3 audio commentaries, 20 deleted scenes, several features, and a blooper reel. DVD Talk awarded the film 3.5 out of 5 stars for both video quality and special features, along with other releases from 2005 and 2007 on the UMD format and the Blu-ray disc format. A special edition was released titled Resurrection Edition of both Resident Evil 2002 and Resident Evil Apocalypse that were released on a 2-disc set on September 4th, 2007. The Resurrection Edition also included an exclusive scene for the up-and-coming Resident Evil Extinction, along with several other bonus features. The movie did win a couple of awards, including Best Sound Editing and the Golden Reel Award at the 25th Genie Awards, and was also nominated for Best Overall Sound. As for any Resident Evil games released in the lead up to Resident Evil Apocalypse, multiple spin-off games would be released, with Resident Evil Dead Aim, which was a light gun shooter for the PlayStation 2, and along with the most notable Resident Evil Outbreak and its expansion Resident Evil Outbreak File 2. But however, in early 2005, Capcom would release the 4th entry in the main Resident Evil games titled Resident Evil 4, with the game set in a village in Spain and switching from the fixed camera angles to a third-person shooter, with the return of Leon Kennedy rescuing the President of the United States' daughter and dealing with a new virus called Los Plagas. The game was released on PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo and PC, with multiple re-releases, and along with the remake in 2023, which fans of the franchise labelled Resident Evil 4 as the best game in the series. Now with the second installment, 2004 was a banger year for zombie films. But out of your Shaun of the Deads or Dawn of the Deads, Resident Evil Apocalypse was basically at the bottom of the horror films list of 2004. It definitely feels like the black sheep of the film franchise, considering that the next few sequels have around a 2 to 3 year release date gap, and is the lowest rated film out of any of the movies in the Resident Evil franchise at the time of recording. Now while it did do some fan service, it did have one job to deliver a decent sequel without making us want to jump into our cars while screaming our feelings away. But when the next film rolled around, the whole film franchise gets flung into a completely different direction that is either the best or the worst thing to happen to the franchise. But let me know your thoughts on Resident Evil Apocalypse. Which movie is your favourite in the franchise? And what other film franchises should I look into next? Let me know and I'll add it to the list. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for the next episode.
You missed one.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. It really does mean a lot. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do want to see more videos like this, don't forget to hit that notification button. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if there's a movie that you guys would like me to look at, feel free to comment down below. Until then, I'm As the Pop Culture Viking, and always love pop culture.